I think you just have to watch out for some certain biases and context mismatch, because with applications, and I'm sure same with web, it's different audiences. For every app has a different audience basically. Hello, experimentation. Thanks for tuning into my talk. I'm Jason, Head of Product Growth at Applica, where I've been focused on growing consumer subscription apps through product-led growth and running niche growth businesses in EdTech, WellTech, and productivity categories. I say niche because of the specific problems I've been tending to address. So while I've covered the full funnel, for this talk, I'd like to drill down into low conversion rates across onboarding and the paywall and how I've approached it. So I know that this community lives and breathes grow and experimentation on the web, and in mobile, the science is the same, but the operating system is different, quite literally. So and that coupled with the joys of platform subscription rules, App Store reviews, in terms of getting each release approved, presents a very nice challenge. Therefore, the aim of this session is to provide a practical playbook focused on hypothesis confidence, tuned for subscription apps. I won't go too heavy into tooling and measurement, but I appreciate they're a very important piece of the puzzle. When I started in product maybe 6 years ago, I started in e-commerce, and so wet my toes with Google Optimize, and then obviously moving into mobile, explored lots of different tools, but Revenue Cap, Purchase Lead, StatStig, Analytics Toolkit, Amplitude, Mixpanel, kind of the usual tools in mobile that I've been used to using, and they're very good. And then so essentially, how do you navigate the plethora of data points available, and does it help if you categorize them into specific areas? So a bit of background. So a lot of the app businesses I've worked with over the past few years have either not known where to start when it comes to testing, or have needed to scale and how they're currently testing. So they've essentially started to run tests, seen some success, but don't have the resource to fully focus on it. So I think the tricky part is knowing how to best inform your hypotheses, and then figuring out how much time you can spend on that part. And then it's essentially a trade-off between speed and quality in my experience. But I think you should always be thinking, who are we helping? Who are we trying to reach? What do you expect them to do? Why should it work now? I'll essentially walk through some of this in terms of what it looks like in practice, alongside a few examples where potentially staying scrappy worked, and where again one rung higher would have helped, say, incorporating more signals. So that kind of leads on to what I've been thinking about in terms of confidence ladder. So it's very much a borrowed mental model adapted for experimentation, and it's essentially a quick lens to judge how much evidence you have before testing. So one example would be to start scrappy, then add product-specific proof, and then stop when signals agree. So usually I tend to think about the different rungs of the ladder. So to start with, a lot of ideas start with something quick. So whether it's an anecdote, a competitor example, a tip from experts in the field, a mix of stuff that's relatively easy to get hold of or has pre-existing research already. So that's kind of a good for a spark, but not for specifics. And then looking at past behavior, understanding experiment history, and making sure you're kind of logging those results. And then if it's a bigger bet, then potentially adding a form of more complex user research. So obviously reviews and things are pretty common to spot pain points. We also have surveys, custom interviews, usability testing. They add qualitative rigor to your testing approach. And then the goal isn't to collect everything. It's to add one more independent signal until two or three point the same way. So that's usually enough, confident enough to run the test and keep things moving. And it also, helps you understand a few different data points that might help influence your hypothesis as well.
My name is Romo Santiago, founder of Experimentation. Our new book, Prove It or Lose It, the mostly no-nonsense guide to surviving experimentation program drama, is out now. Find it at experimentation.com and all major bookstores today.
So yeah, then I think getting more than one perspective before testing kind of carries on what I was talking about. So it's for example, like if you have three different signals versus three surveys, obviously that would be more preferable in terms of having those independent choices. Um, Confidence also grows when different sources align on the same mechanism. So I'll go into that a bit later in terms of the mechanisms. Um, and then independent sources can include anything from App Store reviews to direct conversations with customers, various analytics, sort of analyses, so the behavioural cohort analysis. And so, thinking about it in practical terms, so an example would be before testing a new paywall design, you might triangulate by finding user complaints about pricing, clarity, and reviews. So that'd be one signal. And then you'd be seeing potentially that something in previous experiments, you've seen that something like simplification tests work well. So that could be another signal. And then hearing in interviews, for example, that users get confused by multiple options, that could be a third signal. And so when these independent sources point to the same mechanism, i.e. simplicity, reduces friction, you can be more confident in your hypothesis. So that's one example. Yeah, then so digging into the research. So the way kind of think about it. So there's I think there is definitely a time and a place for scrappy signals. So I think treating them as directional, not definitive, use them to generate sort of ideas and options, and then only converting to like hypotheses that you're confident in after pairing with one or two other signals. But I think it's definitely good for idea generation. It's super helpful. I've definitely had some like success with the more sort of scrappy signals in the past as well. So I think you just have to watch out for some certain biases and context mismatch, because with applications, and I'm sure same with web, it's different audiences. For every app has a different audience basically. So what works for one might not work for the other. So it's important to keep those in mind when you're looking at these quicker signals. And then with this, I feel like I'm teaching the EN community to suck eggs with this slide, but I think sometimes it's good to state the obvious. And there might be something that people miss sometimes. So I think in terms of understanding the mechanisms that worked in previous tests, I think that's super important. So the way I've been thinking about it recently is I set up some granular categorization, which breaks down the elements I test on the paywall, whether it's during onboarding, whether it's certain monetization aspects, whether it's retention, all of the different kind of parts of the funnel. And then basically that helps me to understand what are the common elements that are working versus not working, which categories we've been running tests in. So that helps with planning ahead for the next batch of tests. So, you might be focusing a lot on UX design tweaks, or maybe with copy and imagery and things like that. And if you keep running those tests, maybe you need to move on to a different category, depending on how you plan your tests. Not, we tend to work in like quarterly themes, so that tends to work pretty well. But yeah, if it's like a continuous thing, maybe there's a different approach for that. There's also some interesting results when comparing Android versus iOS. So for mobile specific, different geos and different platform really makes a difference. They do have very different audiences. And then, yeah, essentially codifying what tends to work is, mostly about being organized, documenting what's working, what isn't working, making sure you're capturing your sort of methods and processes, and having that methodology kind of mapped out, I think really helps. To either reproduce that test like later down the line, or or get others to kind of learn from it, or like incorporate these successful practices into something else, so you can consistently learn and grow. Yeah, in the craft. And then yeah, there's the different levels of research that I want to cover. Yes, kind of just how we tend to think about it at Applica, and also this is not like an exhaustive list. There's like lots of different ways you can approach this, but I think yeah, one angle that tends to work very well is tapping into this behavioral psychology, so understanding the cognitive biases. So because I work a lot on like paywall tests, in this consumer space, you do tend to see a lot. Some of these biases do tend to work. So there's the authority bias, which can relate to including social proof from experts in the field on the paywall. That I've seen like really successful results with that. There's also with regards to discounts and promo offers. Obviously, you've got Black Friday coming up soon, so there's like something called the framing effect, which is where decisions depend on how options are presented to you. Ambiguity effect, which why do you prefer options that So there's like certain tactics that we've been incorporating that kind of play into these biases, and then yeah, much to my surprise, some do work. So you'd be surprised. Yeah, what results you get sometimes. So I think it's important to test these things, and it doesn't have to be. Yeah, again, it's not a super complicated hypothesis around why something might work versus not working. It's just you're tapping into these different mindsets and different states that users might be in when they approach your paywall. So yeah, I think these things are kind of tried and tested, but, and it could work. Yeah, for your app or site. Um, yeah, then I think the next level up out of the way I think about it is what else can you do to understand users? How do they make decisions? What's important to them? How do they what do they prefer in terms of like certain features or benefits? And then essentially you know understanding what's unclear for them, or understanding what would increase trust, and then um, using these to prioritize messages. And then if you compare that with like something behavioral or like something you've seen in the past, and then that can kind of help strengthen the hypothesis, but also it just helps you to uncover like a lot more about your user base, um, and understand how users interacting with a certain um, element, a certain section of the app, and then that in turn can help understand like what you should be testing versus what you shouldn't be testing. And so that's especially important for things when you're looking at copy and sort of benefit lists, imagery that might work, that sort of thing. So I think that's yeah, super important, and also yeah, not too labour intensive to carry out. So that's also an important consideration. If you want to move quickly, then you can incorporate these quick options. So surveys and usability testing as well is actually quite useful as well for that. So yeah, I've been using like Listener and a couple of exploring Maze and a few other tools for that, which are very quick. So yeah, that all helps with this multiple signals approach. And then yeah, then that sort of at the top end of the scale, I think is sort of user interviews. and utilising jobs to be done, which is obviously very very popular framework. But I think really digging into what users want and need, and what understanding what outcomes they're looking for, what jobs they're looking to be done with your app, and then sort of basically structuring in the interviews in a way that you're really uncovering these sort of emotional insights and social insights and other aspects of your user base that you probably would you can't find out any other way. And it's you kind of get to gauge like reactions when you're in the interview, so you really understand. Obviously, it's down to interpretation as well, so you have to be careful with that and make sure that you're not you have to take sometimes what people say doesn't always translate to what they do in terms of behaviour in the app. So that's something you have to consider. But I think you get a really kind of a good understanding of what customers are looking for, and then you can back that up with some quantitative data, and then you get a really good sort of understanding overall, which will help strengthen your hypotheses. So yeah, that's kind of the approach in terms of the sort of competence ladder and how I think about the research. And then a couple of case studies. So kind of bucketed these into wins and losses. If you want to get a better understanding of the data, then I could just get in touch. I can share that with you. But essentially, this was for a fitness app. We were just looking at testing manual only, so it's about sort of, I guess, the framing effect where you're just getting users to focus on something specific, and saw like a 12% uplift in ARPU. Ran it for maybe 3 to 4 weeks, and so I think it was again kind of more of a scrappy input. There wasn't like a huge, there wasn't any, well, hardly not much research that went into this. We kind of had had a hypothesis around the category and what works in the category, and annual seems to do work very well for this category, fitness category. So just something that felt had a strong already had quite a strong what do you call it something that already had a strong like mechanism in place. So it's context was a strong fit. So that was a super interesting one. Then again, so this was we carried out some conjoint analysis to understand. This was for a education app around puppy training, and carried out big. I mean, the conjoint analysis wasn't just for obviously this test, but it was something that we'd worked on to understand willingness to pay and understand more about what users were looking for in terms of benefits from the app. So it was a super interesting study, and then wanted to see whether that would translate well into one of our paywall tests. So looked at different benefits that we could focus on for 3 different segments versus control, which is the standard list. I think in terms of execution, maybe it could have been done a bit better. So currently looking at how we iterate on this test, but it didn't the control one, so it wasn't successful. But I think could have been too abstract for users to understand. Relying on users to read everything and understand it. Also another thing which maybe it doesn't happen in practice. So I think it's an interesting one. Had strong confidence in the hypothesis, but maybe it kind of let down by execution. This was very, and again another quite simple test. Essentially, certain framing would reduce sort of mental math. So it's something you're familiar with. Maybe that ambiguity bias where you're just familiar with what you know. So you can understand like a big number saving versus a percentage. So we had like save uh, a specific number versus best value. So it was something you can relate to versus relying on what someone calls best value. So yeah, this was a super successful test. Sort of a large increase in ARPU. That was the main kind of metric we've been measuring. So yeah, super interesting. I think it also uncovered that it worked well in certain regions and countries that we ran it in, and so yeah, it pointed to the fact that maybe the context was better in some countries than others, and so yeah, we kind of uncovered other insights from this test that we probably wouldn't have otherwise. Yes, so it's always important to obviously look outside of the main success metric and have like other secondary metrics that you're looking at to make sure you cover the full spectrum. Then this was another one that we ran. So trying to look at personalization, like a multi-screen paywall. Again, this was influenced by some research that we carried out to do with how different breeds behave and some of the what would users what would appeal most to users depending on what stage of dog they had. So the adult the teenage and then the adult dogs. So tried to run this multi-screen paywall where it would tell a different story depending on where you were in your journey. So the hypothesis was around personalization, improving conversions if it's more specific to a user. But it wasn't the case. So I think we had three different variants that we ran. So I think personalization is quite a hard one to crack, and it takes a bit of time, and I think you have to be prepared to iterate quite a lot to get the learnings and understand what works. And then I think the final one is around this free trial toggle screen. So I think kind of a strong mechanism to essentially appeal to these sort of trust signals that users look for sometimes. And this is a sort of mechanism, so it's like risk reversal. So you're kind of making sure that users are aware of what they're getting with the trial, making sure that they can cancel it, get them to carry out an action where it's you're reminded to you carry out the action to have a reminder before the trial ends. So I think like it's an interesting sort of tactic that I've seen very good results with. So again, this was more of a sort of level one, level two, maybe more level one actually, because it's it wasn't too much research went into it. It's more just again sort of category specific stuff and tying into these biases. So I think super interesting. Again, like if you need more details in any of these, I know it's I didn't go into like the stat sig and those other signals that we look for to make sure the experiment's valid. But we did run it for long enough, and we had used analytics toolkit to measure stat sig. So made sure that we use the sequential method to understand if we need to stop the test early and when it would reach significance. There is we definitely do incorporate that into these tests. And yeah, I can send the details on that if needed. So I think, yeah, essentially key takeaways. In essence, I think the confidence ladder is like a checklist that keeps you honest. So it's, a way to challenge yourself, spot those gaps, stay curious about what you don't know yet. It's not about proving you're right every time. It's about being smart with your bets, learning quickly, and reducing regret later. If you keep, thinking about these things. And I think the more signals you add, the more likely you'll be happy with what you launch. So yeah, and confident that the next round of experiments have more chance of teaching you something. So yeah, that's kind of it. If you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, my details are here. And yeah, it's been great. Going through this with everyone. Yeah, and hope you found it useful. Right, speak to you later. Always be testing. Bye.
My name is Romo Santiago, founder of Experimentation. Our new book, Prove It or Lose It, the mostly no-nonsense guide to surviving experimentation program drama, is out now. Find it at experimentation.com and all major bookstores today.